Eric, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks, Austin.
Yeah, glad to have you.
Yep.
Should be a good time. So your backyard is practically as much of a native plant arboretum as a backyard can be, and that didn't happen on accident. Is there a moment or an incident that made that switch happen for you? What's the story there?
Yeah. So when we bought the property, it was completely overgrown. I had kind of a vision to carve out kind of a park-like look in the back. So clear some of the trees, but make paths, kind of distinctive paths throughout the back. Leave some of the trees there and just kind of make it kind of a park feel. And that was about it. And one day, I think it was Jay, he sent me a link to a video. It was called Selah, Selah, at Bamberger Reserve. And I would encourage everybody to go look at it. It's like a 7-minute video, and it's actually put on by the Texas Parks and Wildlife now. But the story is this. Mr. Bamberger, who grew up with a passion for the outdoors or nature, he, a very humble household, he made it big. He was a co-founder of Church's Chicken, made buku dollars when they sold it off, and bought like, I don't know, 500, maybe it was 5,000 acres in central Texas. So kind of down by Fredericksburg. And it was crap property, had nothing on it. And he talks about it in this story. They drilled like 10 wells, tried to drill 10 water wells on it, found nothing. But the driller said, there's a cavity down there. He said the bit dropped like 40 feet when they were going through there. And so Mr. Bamberger started this restoration project and stripped away a bunch of the cedar trees and put native grass seeds down. Fast forward, he has now donated that property to the national parks, or actually I guess Texas state parks. There are like 10, 12 natural springs on the property. It's absolutely beautiful. And it's beautiful because of native plants and the benefits that they have on it. And that struck me pretty big. And then the second thing that kind of sealed it in for me is I've got a neighbor who is into native plants. And if you look at her house, it kind of has that rough look to it. And when we first moved in, she brought a couple plants over to give to us. And she said, I grow plants and I've got all kinds of plants if you want more. So I got to talking to her and she introduced me to native plants. And tying back to the Bamberger thing, which was more focused on native grasses and the benefits of them, and along with the native plants, that got me started. And she told me, she said, you need to read this book, and it's called Nature's Best Hope by Doug Tallamy. And his story is, that's what kind of sealed the deal for me. It's really more focused on like the food web, ecology, biodiversity, in that we've created these sterile, he calls them like desert oases or something. So our yards where we plant non-native grasses essentially kills any biodiversity or any of the things that most of the food webs need. Because if we were to go out and collect all the insects and the animals around here, a lot of them over time have developed in compliance with the plants or whatever that they eat off of. So for little bugs, some of them have long snouts so they can get down into the native plants. Yeah. So he talks about this, and the thing that really struck with me was he was focused on caterpillars. What he talks about in there is, and I didn't know this, 60% of a baby bird's diet consists of caterpillars. So when we think about caterpillar, at least when I thought about caterpillars, I'm like, well, this is going to turn into a butterfly or something pretty, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I would want to save a caterpillar or raise a caterpillar. Well, the reality is that's somebody's food. Wow. And then that got me thinking about like, well, essentially, we learn in school, grade school, about, kind of the food web or the circle of life, but we forget it quickly. And so like when we're spraying for bugs or all this stuff. It's like, at the end of the day, that's something's meal. And ultimately that something is probably something that we enjoy. It's a bird on the porch, a rabbit in your yard, or something like that. So the Nature's Best Hope kind of sealed it for me. And I have since shared that book with many people who I think have kind of, found the same message out of that. And then if you do any studying of Doug Tallamy, he goes on, he writes several other books, but he started this initiative and he calls it Homegrown National Park. And the idea is, if we rely on, if we tend to look at things like, well, we've got national parks to take care of all the native stuff and on all that. We don't need to worry about it. And that's true. But the thing is, a lot of animals and insects, they migrate, right? So there's a distance between one national park and another national park, and that's our landscapes. And his idea is, you don't have to turn everything over to natives. But if you start in a corner and you do a few natives, and we all do that together, his idea is we can generate 20 million acres of native and native plants and things like that to help build out the food web and create that biodiversity that we need in the world.
Wow.
So that kind of sealed the deal for me.
Yeah, and especially when you're talking about like filling in the gaps between the national parks or the state parks. It's like, even if there's a few people at their houses that have a backyard, that could be enough to kind of help fill in those gaps.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, and part of his website is, if you commit to doing something, again, in some of the stuff I can talk about, like, there's no expectation that if you have to, it's all or nothing, right? Because I got stuff that's not native.
Sure.
But part of his website is, you go in and you mark the spot on a map that you have committed to. And so you literally can see this thing building out in front of you, this homegrown national park.
Wow. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Like, just have the national park functionally stretch like that. What are some of the benefits of native plants, like planting a plant that's native to the region you live in?
I think the best thing about it is, we use a lot of water. And we use a lot of water. I think watering our yards, it's one of the top consumers. Actually, there's other things like nuclear power plant cooling of that. That's probably the number one consumer of water. But for residential, watering your yard is probably the number one thing that we consume water for. So the number one, number two, number three benefit of native plants are, because they were here before we had water to our houses, they don't need water. They might need water, or they might benefit from water the first 1 or 2 years of their life to help them get started, because before water, they had to have all the right conditions, right? Had to have a few rains in the right time. So if we can help supplement that over the first year or two, the benefits of native plants are, they all have far deeper root structures than anything that we bring in. And so that allows them to get deeper roots and to have far better predictability in between the long dry spells that we get. So water consumption or more efficient water usage is by far, I think, the best benefit of it.
You mentioned with the state park project, homegrown national park, right?
Yep.
Before you knew about native plants, what did you think a good yard looked like, or a good landscape looked like?
Yeah, probably a lot like a lot of the yards around here. It was clean. It had really straight edges, on the mowing. I probably was more focused on perennials. So there's annuals, plant that just grows and dies, and then you have to reseed it every year. There's perennials that come back every year. For the most part, over a course of 5, 10, 15 years, that system might die. And then there's biennials that will live about 2 years. So I probably just, my nature would have had more perennials in there, because it just kind of feels better than replace them all the time.
Sure, yeah.
But clearly I had the nice lines. I had the, this needs to go there, clean look. very clean look. And that was actually a big adjustment as a parent, right? So I like to have my yard very nicely manicured. But then as Jay was growing up, it became time he needs to learn how to mow the yard. And so turning loose of that really nice, clean lines to the first time he did it, which wasn't so nice and clean, but I had to tell him he did a great job, and he did. So that was probably the start of my ability to kind of go from the really good, clean stuff to the not so clean stuff, right?
That's fascinating. And also, I mean, that's so funny. Just like,
yeah,
you have to like let go of control of that. Right. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm sure, he probably got better as time went on, but
absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh my goodness. So when I think about trying to change the way you approach landscape like that, and something that is there's a very weird nuance here where it can be very in your control. You can have a very manicured, perfect yard and lawn, and the backyard looks stunningly, square. But it can also very easily be out of your control. Like you said, when you bought the property, it was totally overgrown, and probably some native, probably some invasive plants there, just full and kind of the opposite, right? Pure chaos.
Yeah.
So whenever you're making the transition either way, really, to a native plant that is still manicured-ish, but allowed to do what it's going to do, you're getting forced into something. And it's like you're like you said, you're kind of letting go of that need of control, but it's like you're letting it control you while also trying to keep it within its confines, right? Mm-hmm. How has having to get forced into what native plants can do changed your perspective on, what a yard can be, but maybe even limits in general in life?
Yeah. Well, in terms of what it can be, it's really it's probably part age too. I've kind of learned to not sweat the small stuff, but it's allowed me to kind of take a step back and know that I used to look at things more as a point in time, but with native plants, it's kind of an evolution. Right? In that what it might look like one year, the next year will change. They evolve, and it could evolve because of the nature of the plant, like its maturity, but it also can evolve just from the changing conditions around it. Like trees grow, and what may have sun one time, the next year because of the growth may be part sun.
Oh,
and
right.
Then or some of the other stuff that you learn is that the plant size, right? So what you have something by itself one year, you put something in next to it that's a little bit taller, and all of a sudden it starts to get some of the sunlight challenged out of it. So the balancing of all of that has probably been one of the changes that I've seen. And I forgot the second part of that question.
Yeah, so kind of a longer question. So when you think about like what you just said in comparison to like having limits, and my gut reaction when I think about native plants is that they're going to want to grow and just keep going because this is the area they're supposed to be in. And maybe this is just an old-fashioned thing to think, but it's a little rude to have your stuff grow into someone else's yard.
Yeah.
And so like limiting it, which you kind of have to quote unquote do. I'm curious how that even works in general.
Yeah.
But then if that's applied in your mind for life in general with having limits and boundaries.
Yeah. Well, and the cool thing is with native plants is that, you could replace your conventional, the biggest difference with native plants versus a lot of the plants that we use today, it's really the time that they're in bloom. So we live in a world that's very consumer focused, and I want it now, and I want it long. And so the big box stores find these plants that will do well. They'll thrive in different areas, and then they genetically modify them to where, the things that we like about them, which are the flowers, that they maximize the amount of flowers. They change the colors of them. They do all these things. The biggest difference between that plant and a native plant is probably the blooming time. There are some native plants that bloom months, but I would say the majority of them probably bloom weeks. So to have a plant taking up space in your yard for 52 weeks and have it blooming for those 52 weeks versus something that's going to bloom for 4 months of those 52 weeks, that's the route we typically go. And that's the non-native thing that most of them are annuals. But so in terms of the boundaries, you can still have the boundaries with native plants. But I think it's also just kind of given me the freedom of not worrying about those boundaries. Like, sometimes we create our own stress by having this vision of this clean cut yard. And then when you allow somebody else to do it, who does it, that may not do it quite as well, you can see, that's okay. Like the fact that his lines weren't as straight as my lines, it didn't affect my life. It really didn't. And probably helped his, because now he's learned, some accountability. He's learned some satisfaction of completing something, probably a little sweat labor there. So, yeah, so it actually, through the whole process, has really kind of taught me to take a step back and don't sweat the small stuff.
Whenever you're letting that, I think it's a perfect way to describe, like when you're letting the land kind of be what it's kind of supposed to be in a way. And like, obviously there's a lot of plants that are native to whatever area you live in. So you still get some choice, right? You still get a little of that control, but whenever you're able to just plant something and maybe a little bit of supplementation, but just let it go. What does it feel like to be able to just like let the land be what the land's going to be?
It's really cool. And it's cool to see how things perform in different areas. And if you have the ability to plant, like to have 2 or 3 plants and put them in different locations to see how they do, or if you don't, plant it in one spot one year and then move it to another. It's really cool to see how they perform. And again, one of the things about it is you're never done. So while there is satisfaction and feeling like you've accomplished something, like I just planted this plant. And I guess this doesn't just apply to native plants. But that's a milestone, right? It got planted. Mm-hmm. The next milestone is now it's grown. Now it's got some buds on it. Now it's flowered. And then the next year after, it's died back to the ground. Holy cow, it's coming back up, right? So it's like there's just ongoing milestones because you're never really finished.
So you constantly get like that reward every once in a while.
And then all of a sudden, you'll see something growing 50 feet away that looks a lot like something you had over here. And now all of a sudden you're seeing where the birds and everything else come in play. They eat a seed, they come over here, they plant the new seed, or squirrels, right? So that's kind of cool too, to see now all of a sudden everything starts to multiply. Yeah.
What's the longest you've ever had to wait to see something you've like put down come to fruition?
Probably, I had passion vine. I don't know if you've ever heard of passion vine. It's passion flower. It's called passion flower because of there's a lot of correlations, or people have come up with a lot of correlations to the Passion of Christ, right? From the number of points on the petals and all that stuff. But it's a really cool vine, and I've always wanted to have one. So I bought one at a native plant sale, planted it in the spring. It started growing, and what's that hot summer, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and it died about halfway through the summer. And I kept kind of watering it a little bit to see if that was it. And then all of a sudden it poked back up in the fall and it died back down again. And so this whole time, it was almost a whole year. And then in the next spring, it came back up and it started growing. So it's like, all these moments, what you don't also think about with plants, and again, it's not just native plants. What looks like it's dead above ground, it might not be dead below ground, and that's the part we don't know. Like, so sometimes you just got to trust, keep watering it, don't overwater it, but just trust that it's doing its thing below the ground, and eventually it'll come back up.
What made you want to get the passion vine and the passion flower?
It's really it's pretty, but it's also a host plant for. So in the native plant world, they talk a lot about native plants being host plants for certain insects. So I've got native plants that are host plants to monarch butterflies, obviously milkweed. Everybody knows that. Mm-hmm. I've got like golden Alexander is a host plant for the queen butterfly, I think. And there's a whole bunch of them. It's stuff that that probably never have heard about. Mm-hmm. So they look at it from a host plant perspective. So and I'm not even sure where I was going with that one.
The passion vine and the passion flower.
Yeah, and so I think it was a host plant for something, and because of the nature of the flowers, I really wanted one, so I got it. And the cool thing to that is I had another vine coming up this spring. A lot of times when I see something growing that I don't recognize, I'll just let it go until it gets to a point where I can identify it. Mm-hmm. And comes to find out there's also a green passion flower, which I didn't know. It's native, and that's what was randomly growing in my yard. So I let it grow, and it has the same type of flower, except it's about the size of a quarter versus a passion vine flower is probably the size of maybe 3 or 4 inches in diameter. So yeah.
Wow. It's like you were talking about before with the host like insects and everything, where it's part of like the food web.
Yeah.
And so how much of an influence do you get on the various other fauna besides insects based on what you plant? Like, have you seen like I planted this particular thing and this kind of bird came and I hadn't seen it before? Is that something you've seen happen?
100%. And so if you ever get a chance, look at pipe vine swallowtail. They're absolutely beautiful. They're black and they have kind of metallic blue, kind of just painted on their wings.
Whoa.
I planted woolly pipe vine, which is the host plant to pipe vine swallowtail. And woolly pipe vine is a pretty ugly looking vine, but it took off. And I built kind of a trellis for it, and it was growing. And then in the spring, all of a sudden, I saw these caterpillars. They're black, and they have these really long, they're kind of gnarly looking, actually, orange, like pins sticking out of them.
Whoa.
Yeah, I mean, you would probably hesitate to touch one because you're like, are those things sharp? And so I've used, there's an app out there called iNaturalist or iNat. Mm-hmm. And I highly recommend it to anybody, even if you're not into anything. You can point it at a plant or a bug or a bird, and it will come back with suggestions of what it is. And it's very accurate. So I took a picture of these cats or caterpillars with my iNat app, and it's a caterpillar for the pipevine swallowtail.
Huh.
And so there you have it. Never seen one in my life. So ever since then, I've seen hundreds of pipevine swallowtails because now we have host plants for them to lay their eggs. And the other thing that kind of this whole process has changed my mind with is these caterpillars were annihilating this vine. Like literally just, I mean, say there's 100 leaves on it. First time I saw it, they were down to 50 leaves and they're just devouring it. I'm like, my vine's going away.
Yeah.
But at the same time, these caterpillars are eating, they're getting fed, right? Mm. So like, now do I care about the vine or do I care about the caterpillars? Mm. And now all of a sudden the birds are eating caterpillars. I'm like, oh, well, I'm not going to get the butterflies. Like, but it's, enough of them will survive that'll hatch and they'll become butterflies. And then a bunch of them become food for the birds and it all works out.
I feel like that balance is really it's really like beautiful in kind of a weird way, where what you just said and something you kind of briefly mentioned before, where the really like frankly ugly vine brings such a stunning bird with like the blue metallic painted on it. I mean, that's something so ugly bringing in something so beautiful. I mean, that's amazing. And then like that balance of the caterpillars eating the vine and the birds eating the caterpillars, and like which one do you care the most about? And it's like, well, at the end of the day, it's probably going to balance itself out. And to an extent, it's not for us to care about.
100%. Yeah.
How does that, like, gosh, it's such a, it gets kind of difficult, right? To deal with mentally. It seems like it would be, because I mean, it's the life cycle, of course, but when you care so much about something and then have to accept another thing as equivalent to it, how do you deal with that? How does that feel inside?
Yeah, well, it's kind of a little stressful, but it's also kind of pleasant in the fact that, to your point, like, this is just nature doing its thing. And so I shouldn't stress if, this plant's getting eaten up, or the, birds are eating the caterpillars, or whatever. And I have found myself in some cases, like some years, if the milkweed, sometimes they'll lay on the first couple milkweed that come up. And so the caterpillars, the eggs hatch, the caterpillars start devouring it before there's enough milkweed for the rest of them. And then all of a sudden you look at it and you're like, oh, we're about out of milkweed. And there are actually people who, get on these Facebook posts or chats or whatever, and they're like, does anybody have any milkweed left over? Because I'm about out, right? They're trying to help these monarch caterpillars survive. And, whatever survival means is it food for something, or are they going to turn into a monarch and go their own separate way?
We kind of touched on it before, but a lot of people see like a very natural, like, native landscape, and they just see like mess and chaos. Is there something that they misunderstand about like what it means to be orderly, or what it's supposed to look like?
Great question. I think a lot of that is on the native plant world, right? We tend to, I think, and it doesn't have to be, like, they've kind of created that, like, because I created a plant bed in our front yard that I actually keep neat and orderly, kind of to demonstrate that they can be neat and orderly. But then if you look at the rest of the backyard, it's orderly. I wouldn't say it's neat, right? And some of that some of that's on us. But it doesn't have to be. I think for me, a lot of it is just that there's so much to do. Maybe if it was a smaller space, I could be more focused on keeping more of it neat and orderly. Mm-hmm. But then again, and part of the reason, I mentioned, a lot of times stuff will start coming up and I'll just let it go, right? Well, you can't do that if you're trying to be neat and orderly, right? And so some of the experiment, or, what you're dealing with, you have to like let it go for some time, which maybe means not mowing for a month.
There's some freedom in that. If you're not trying to have it be perfect, you get a little bit of that freedom, a little bit of that like wiggle room almost.
Yeah.
Are there benefits to like really letting it just go? Or is it not, is that kind of a net negative?
No, I think there are. Because the ground is nothing but a seed bank, right? Right, the ground that this concrete is sitting on, there are seeds in there. Some of those seeds could be 20 years old, some could be 200 years old. And no two seeds are created equal. Some seeds have such a hard shell on them, like in order to scarify them, which is to break through the covering, like people take grinders to them. They're that hard. And so those types of seeds aren't going to germinate in the first year or two. Maybe it takes 100 years for that shell. So I think anything that you can just set and let go for a while you'd be surprised what will actually grow. Now, some things may not grow because of the like Bermuda. Bermuda is probably the biggest. It's a problem that we've created that we can never curl back Bermuda grass because it's invasive, and
Bermuda grass is invasive?
Bermuda.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. Oklahoma State, like they have spent tons of time their ag business doing trying to figure out how to get rid of Bermuda grass effectively in a way that will scale. And like, there's all kinds of YouTube videos out there on it, and nobody's figured out. There used to be this 2,4-D was a chemical that we could put on lawns. Mm-hmm. It's since been outlawed. Oh. And I think that, and I don't know that was even, that wasn't the solution probably. Mm. And the reason they outlawed it's probably there's, bad things that it does, but it is, but the problem is it's so far gone. There's no way to get rid of it.
Wow.
For example, if even to put in like a native lawn would be difficult if you have Bermuda there, just because probably the only way you could do it is to round up the whole thing. Roundup is not a good chemical, even though it's legal. It's extremely expensive. So to do it on any type of a scale would be cost prohibitive. Mm. And then you still run the risk if you don't get it all, like it's going to come back. And about the only way you could overcome Bermuda with native grass is to put in stuff that's going to outgrow it, so it'll ultimately take over the sun. Mm-hmm. But even Bermuda grass, I mean, if you just let it go, it'll get a foot and a half tall. So, I mean, yeah, it can still manage to eke out some light to survive.
Wow. Where is it native to?
Probably Asia. A lot of the things we bring in are from Asia or China or stuff like that.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow. I had no idea Bermuda grass was invasive.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of Nandina?
It sounds familiar.
Nandina and Bradford pear trees used to be a staple in any new housing development. Mm-hmm. There's still quite a few Nandina around here. Bradford pears, we finally come around and realize that they're not good. They're terribly weak trees. The reason they put them in, they grow fast.
Right. And when it grows fast, it grows weak.
And it grows weak because it doesn't get good joints. Mm. But we don't like to wait for things, so we want fast. So but they're terrible trees, and people have finally come around to where it's not considered an invasive plant, but they've done away with planting Bradford pears. Mm. Nandina's also, it's a pretty little shrub. I think it's from Asia as well. It gets these little red berries on them. The problem is the berries are poisonous, and the problem is this plant resembles another native plant. I can't remember what it looks like. Berries are very similar, but they're a little larger. So the birds that are used to the native plant will eat these other berries, and some of them die because this berry does not fit with their whole digestive system.
Yeah,
and they're poisonous. So yeah, so we do things like that. That nobody has any ill will, but we don't recognize what it is that we're doing. And the best defense to any of that is, why do we need to bring anything in? Like there's for thousands of years things grew here, and native plants, like if you see an unmanicured native plant landscape, it can be beautiful. And actually I think it can be therapeutic, maybe even.
Say more on that. How do you explain that beauty to somebody when it isn't perfectly manicured and symmetrical in all those ways?
Yeah, well, that's probably more in the eyes of the beholder. But I think people look at like sunsets and things like that, and those are pretty messy if you think about it. Like, and maybe even the messier they are, the more pretty they are. If you look at a sunset where like there's all these little cirrus clouds and stuff like that, and maybe the horizon is down here, but then all of a sudden you have these kind of messy cirrus clouds up here, and they're just throwing some dynamic blues or something into it. So I think some of that is just in, some of the people aren't going to get past, right? So there's a person that I'm very close to that I don't push native plants on anybody, but I take an opportunity to talk about them, and 99% of the people are very receptive to it and intrigued, and typically will do something. But I have one person who there's no changing this person, and this person will always go to the big box stores, and they'll always just think in terms of, this is what I'm going to have, and I think your native plant stuff is good, and I think everybody else should do the native plant stuff, but I'm not going to.
Oh my gosh. That's very funny. And I think it's fair if 99% of the people are on board at least a little bit. You can have somebody who really wants, their perennials or whatever they have. That's okay, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think over time, I think education will help people, and probably even, this individual, in that there are messy native plants, but again, there are a lot of native plants. There's a lot of sages and salvias that are native, that can, have colors all over, the spectrum, and live in a pretty conformed, nice and, kind of tidy box or a place in your landscape. And it's interesting, in the last 10 years, I would say, I've seen there's a lot more in terms of native plants that are available to people. There's native plant nurseries now. There's some that claim they are, but if you really understand what native plants are, they're using it for advertisement, which it's good and bad. It's good in that native plants now no longer have a negative connotation. So somebody's looking at it like, well, that's a positive word, so I'm going to build it into my, even though I'm really not going to do it.
If they know about it, like they're aware.
Yep.
And it's like, this is a good thing. And if they choose to dig into it further, they'll then know, like, oh, this actually isn't, and they'll get the right thing.
Yep.
The knowledge is good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think any type of publicity, is good. And I think it's helped the community a lot. And even I kind of dog on the big box stores, but there's probably a chance you could go to a big box store and dig through their stuff, and there's probably a native plant in there somewhere.
Sure. They might even get it right on accident sometimes.
Exactly.
You used a cool word a minute ago about talking about the sunsets and comparing it. I think it sounds like a good word to describe native plants and how those landscapes and yards can look is dynamic. Where you mentioned how over the various years, the same plant can look different based on its conditions. If there's more shade one year, or for whatever reason there's less rain, or various things. That word dynamic, I think, is really a good word from what we've talked about so far. And I think it ties in well with how I think native plants are a good parallel to some of the struggles that people have just in life in general, with the way that modern society, we've talked about it a little bit, with patience, or the lack thereof, and wanting things right now, and then they never go away. Like the annuals, the biannuals, the perennial, all those kinds of things, which it's not bad, but whenever you overemphasize, it becomes a problem. I think it's increasingly common to see people, to kind of take a bit of a small twist here, seeing people ignoring their strengths that they have, like in their personality, in favor of something that looks or feels flashy and popular. And I think you hit very well on that kind of idea with the Bradford pears and the Nandinas, is that right?
Nandina, yeah.
Where we do things that feel very good in the moment and get a result very quickly, but it's a very fragile and flimsy result that might feel permanent whenever we're trying to convince ourselves to do it or to buy it, if it's the tree or the bush. But I think people do that to themselves on a very personal level without even realizing it, where they forego what they are good at or what they have an interest in favor of a thing that feels like people are going to like them for it. Do you think that we've confused our ability to like nurture and care for something, whether that's ourselves and our strengths or a plant in a native plant, with a need for control?
I think that's brilliant. I think absolutely. Uh, and I think there's a lot probably unsaid about just gardening in general. And you kind of hit on it a little bit, is that there's some satisfaction knowing that you did this. Well, yeah, maybe the water and the sun helped out, but it wouldn't have happened had you not taken the time to do that. And, I think a lot of people, especially in the area that we live in, even the satisfaction of doing the non-native plant beds, they miss out on because they're just writing a check, right? They're doing it kind of like you said. It's just so when I come home, I can see this nice manicured thing and it looks like my neighbors. It looks like looks like I fit in the neighborhood. And so, now I'm in. Everybody will think that, I've got a cool house in my yard. My yard is, man, I love your flower beds. They're beautiful. And that makes me happy because everybody else is going to compliment me on my yard. Yeah, no, I think the, not to go completely off topic, but I think the mental benefit, and I don't know if you may touch on this in a little bit, is probably one of the biggest things that I get out of, and it doesn't even have to be native plants. I mean, even if I wasn't doing that, just being out in the yard and doing things with my hands and avoiding technology.
Say more on that. Yeah, we can go right into it. I mean, what about that do you see such benefit from?
I think it's and I'm obviously at a different place, but I think it's the disconnection from technology is a big one. And for me, and I'm at a different point in my life, but for me, it's also then disconnection from technology, but then the connections, the spiritual connection for me. I look at a lot of what I do in, from a religious perspective. Like, I mean, God gave us this beautiful world, and we can keep it beautiful, or we can use it up and let somebody else deal with it. And I think as we're pushing the boundaries in some of those, use it up and let somebody else deal with it, which with anything, that's kind of the impetus that creates change, right? Like, we can start something and we know where it's headed, but we've got a long ways ahead of that. So we're not going to do anything with it until we get to that impetus. We're like, okay, this is serious now, right? And so I think there's that. So there's a spiritual part of it. I feel very connected to God when I'm out working in my yard, and then just the personal satisfaction of being able to say that I completed this, even though, like I said earlier, it's really never complete. It's just a different stage, right? So I've gotten it to this point. It's like, feels good. You come out there 2 weeks later, you've reached another stage, like feels even better, right?
Yeah, seeing the progress in almost real time. Yeah. But then it is a wait in between. It's not like you plant like a little flower in your flower bed and then 2 days later it blooms because it was already almost bloomed. Having, it's 2 weeks in between, or maybe even longer in between each of those stages, but it's a very slow burn of that reward.
Yeah.
I think the connection to God is fascinating, and a really key kind of insight in doing hard things is whenever you are spending time bettering creation in a non cheap way, I think that is one of the best ways to be in touch with God.
Yeah.
And I mean, just quickly trying to think of something. I mean, gardening is probably, I've never really thought about it this way. This is a very fresh thought, but it's one of, the best ways, one of the best examples of that. That's really stunning. Like that is sinking very deep into me right now.
Well, and even like vegetable gardening, right? There's some of that in there because now you're growing something that's far more healthy for you than what you could buy in a store because again, it hasn't been genetically modified to produce the biggest and the most. It is, just as God created it. And now you're consuming that in your body, which is extremely healthy. Like God doesn't want you to just, waste your body away, right?
Right.
Like there's so much to that, I think.
Yeah. Like there's it's not like a box of Rice Krispie treats is not, terrible to enjoy every once in a while.
Yeah.
But a zucchini from your garden is probably like a little bit better.
Right. Absolutely.
And then there's the reward of like you create like in a partial way you created this thing. Where you, like you said, obviously there's the sun and the water, but you put into it. You put yourself into this thing and then you get to actually reap the benefits of it. Yeah, I think that's a great parallel to like the creation story, right? Where God creates us and then like he, reaps the benefits of that, which is a people that honor him. Oh, this is cool.
Yeah.
I love that you brought this up because I love to find like these little connections that I told you about, that there's always something in basically any topic that pulls it back to what is true and like where a grounded, rooted, truth in life really is. Oh man. Yeah. That's that's cool. And I think it parlays very well into another thought that I had, which is how you think about ownership. Like whenever you think about, what it means to say like, this is my land, it's like welcome to my house that's on my acre or my 2 acres. How has your perspective changed on that?
Oh, it's totally changed. And kind of to pull in the whole religious part of it, like Jill's been the best one for me with this. It's like it's not our money, it's not our land. So we are to be the best stewards of it. And it can be daunting, and this is probably a barrier for people going to native plants. Might be is that I can put in 2 or 3 of them, but what is that going to do? And I think it's that capped mentality that is a barrier. I mean, it probably was for me too, because you think about it like, well, it can be hard work. Like, and what is it for? At the end of the day, I'm going to die. The kids may or may not want the house, and if they don't, somebody else is going to take it over. So all of that I did, if it's a consumer driven person, and it very well could, it could be like, you know what, clear it out and let's build more houses, or let's, put in a tennis court or something like that. That's all possibly, but I can't get wrapped up in that. And so I've changed the way I look at things. Is like, I can't change the world, but I can change 5,500 Wildwood Drive. Or, you think about like people that foster animals or rescue animals, like, and I've got a big heart and I would love to, you think about that. Like I don't know if you know the story. We rescued a possum.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. And the enjoyment that came from that, I'm like, I want to save all the possums. Like, but I can't do that. But I can make the life of this one possum pretty dang awesome. And I think that makes God happy. Like just that one. I don't have to change the world. If I do 1 or 2 things, I think he's pleased with me. I can always do better. But I think we have to change it from knowing that you're not going to change the world, but you can change something. And oh, by the way, while you're doing it, you might actually have people watching you, which is the witnessing part of being a follower of God. And they may change too. And then if you start having other people change because of either what they've seen you do or what you've shared with them, hey, that's cool too.
Tell the story of the possum. just real quick because I love it.
Yeah.
It's so good.
So we have chickens, as you know, and I was went out in the morning. It was kind of a cool morning. It was a really cool morning, actually. And we hang the feeders up on hooks at night because possums will get into the feeders and eat the food. And so I went out there and I brought it to, actually, maybe I'd forgotten to hang it up that night. I think I had forgotten to hang it up that night. So I went down there and I looked in the feeder and there was, I mean, it literally weighed 30 grams because I weighed it. It was a little baby possum, just, probably the size of a couple of these bottle caps. And I was like, dang. So the mom, they hang on their backs. They hang on their mom's backs. I'm sure she crawled in there and ate. And as she was getting out, he probably got caught and fell down in there. And the mothers are, that's part of the circle of life. And if you don't not able to hang on, then you're going to get lost. And so I reached in there to grab it, and it was pretty cold. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm just going to hang on to it. And there's a place kind of up by our garage, our trash cans, where I typically put dead animals, because then at night the coyotes will come through and clean them up. And I'd rather something benefit from it than throw it in the trash can and having it decay and all that. So I had it in my hand, finished my chores, and I was walking up to the trash cans, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to look at it one more time, because it had been in my hand maybe 5 minutes. And I looked and I sat there and watched it, and all of a sudden it started moving just a little bit. I'm like, uh-oh. So I took it in, warmed it up. Long story short, they make formula for baby animals. They make formula for babies, but they also make formula for baby animals.
Huh.
And so I got some of that. We started bottle feeding it, and we named him Plum. Anyway, Plum grew up, grew big. He would crawl up my pant leg, crawl up on my shoulder, sit on my shoulder, and he loved marshmallows. So I'd put a marshmallow in my mouth, and he would just reach over and eat the marshmallow right out of my mouth. And he became my buddy, but eventually we had to release him into the wild, and so we did that. So it was a great experience, and wanted to help more possums, because they're pretty cool animals. But anyway, that's the story of the possum.
Oh my gosh. I think a lot of people see possums as purely like a nuisance or a pest. So hearing like rescuing a possum is so unorthodox.
Oh. Well, and they're kind of the face that only a mother can love too, right? But having raised it, now I think they're cute, and like our whole family does. But before, they're like, they're pretty ugly looking, right? So it all comes from your experience, I guess.
Oh gosh, yeah, I love the possum story. Plum, I met Plum once.
That's right.
Oh my gosh, it's so weird to see a possum just running around like kind of like a dog, but like a very funny looking dog. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And so, I mean, kind of similar. I know you have bees too.
Yep.
What have the bees taught you that you couldn't learn from like a book or something?
Yeah, bees are so Western European honeybees. They're not native. Exactly. No. So there's a story behind that too. Mm-hmm. But they're extremely interesting. I'll try to keep on topic here. Mm-hmm. The Western European honeybee are one of the few bees that colonize, right? So they live, no matter what size of the hive it is, whether it's 10,000 bees or 90,000 bees, they all operate under one queen. And what I've learned from that, and we could learn, if we could only learn as a society, right, is that like you can live in harmony and under the leadership of one person if everybody just does their job. Like in bees, a worker bee's life is probably 5 weeks, but they don't just they're not just hatched and then all of a sudden they go start doing whatever they want to do. It's their responsibilities are very orderly. They spend the first part of their life never leaving the hive. So they're cleaning out the honeycomb, they're feeding the larva, they're doing all these things. And then they their working evolution over those 5 weeks evolves, right? So then they get introduced to the outdoors, and then they do a I can't even think of the word now. There's a flight. It's a flight where they're essentially calibrating their GPS, and they.
Whoa.
Yeah, I've got it. I saw them do it. I have it recorded. It's on my It's on my Instagram page. It's gosh, I can't think of it. Anyway, the new bees come out of the hive. They walk up the front of it. They fly back about 5 inches, and then they start doing these figure eights.
Whoa.
And that figure eight is calibrating their GPS, and they'll do this over maybe 20 minutes. And it's not like they're just randomly doing this. It's orchestrated. They do it 2 or 3 times a day, and that calibrates their GPS, and now they become foragers. So they start going out and finding stuff. And then one of their last jobs is to be to be a scout. Like if they need to find bees, will split. So that's their way to grow more colonies. And it's usually in the spring, and the queen might take half of the hive with her and go start a new hive somewhere else. And then the rest of the bees will raise they'll raise a new queen to take over. So these scout bees then will go out and find new places for them to live. So, and they all do it. They don't yell at each other. They don't post bad things on each other about Facebook. They do it. It's amazing. It's beautiful. Like to see one, and they don't talk. Like they do it through pheromones or through smells, and they can do it so well. And I think as a society, we could learn so much from that. Yeah, I mean, we don't have to just follow, but they also, if they think the queen is failing, they will take her out.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Bees have revolutions?
Yes.
What?
So they'll raise in failing normally is probably more of in physical term, because her main job is to lay eggs. Mm-hmm. So they groom her, they feed her. She is just a egg laying machine. So if they feel like she's physically failing, which they do as they get older, they will replace her.
Whoa.
And they'll do that by raising a new queen, and with the expectation that new queen will hatch. She'll go find the old queen and she'll take her out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I think the harmony thing is a very cool takeaway, because yeah, I think a lot of people think about bees as a very scary bug because you don't get stung. And I guess to an extent, people you know about bees, the colonies, worker bees, the queen, but seeing that like in your backyard every day and seeing like the coordination, the GPS system, must be so satisfying. Like just another layer on the satisfaction of like what you can do versus what nature will do on its own.
Yeah. And
like seeing that harmony in action in real time. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah, it is really cool. And one of the things that I have learned through this whole process is that there are, believe it or not, there are native bees. And there are 4,000 native bees in the United States. 4,000.
4,000.
They say 2,000 of those are in Texas.
What?
Yes. So now there's this dilemma. So people have come to believe, and I think there's some truth to it. And like, I am not well educated from a book and academic sense. I'm well educated from a school of hard knocks sense, right? So, we've gotten people to believe that if honeybees don't exist, that we don't exist, because they do so much in terms of pollination. And there's definitely some truth to that. Like the avocado orchards and, I mean, probably any kind of, fruit or vegetable that you buy in the store, a lot of the pollination comes from honeybees. There are guys and gals that have apiaries, which are just collections of beehives that do it on the commercial level, that they'll literally put them on semi-trucks, ship them out to California in the springtime when these things are blossoming. The growers pay them, and they just, set these beehives up in there, and these bees just go pollinate, right?
Commercial beehives.
Yeah. Huh. So there's some truth to that, fact that if honeybees didn't exist, our food source would be impacted. What I don't agree with is we would cease to exist, because there are native bees. And yes, maybe native bees aren't in the masses that honeybees are, and maybe they wouldn't do it as effective or efficient. So cost-wise, it may not be as clean. So our price of goods may go up, but I believe the native bees would fill a large gap. The problem is we don't know what that is, because, you can't measure that. But in, kind of going back to the whole thing around natives, like the food circle or the food web, if there are really 2,000 native bees in Texas alone, what happens if those become extinct? What happens if the honeybees consume all of the resources that the native bees would like to, and now they start to become extinct? So for me personally, I'm at a point where I've got some internal struggling with that. But at the end of the day, if somebody were to say that honeybees are a problem because they're consuming a lot of the resources, in a heartbeat, I would eliminate my beehives. I feel that comfortable with it, because I've seen native bees in my yard. And again, they come from the, a little bit larger than a pinhead to a big bumblebee. And they're so cool to see them. And, you don't see them quarreling a lot with the honeybees. You see wasps sometimes quarrel with the honeybees. So I think there's some balance that they're striking. But I could see how, if you have too many honeybees, because, you think about, like, one beehive will produce 3 or 4 gallons of honey a year. And the thing about that honey is, coming from flowers, and the nectar in the flowers, and how many flowers that it takes just to make a teaspoon of honey is incredible. So that's kind of the new thing that I'm in. I wouldn't say a conundrum with. I've kind of decided, what I'll do, but yeah, native bees, and most of the native bees aren't colonies. They live in either as an individual or in small groups, and they live in the ground.
What?
They dig holes, or they live in hollow stalks. So kind of another thing that you learn with the natives, and it doesn't have to be natives, is, and this is where the kind of the rough look comes in, is that leave the leaves, right? So I will try not to mulch or rake up my leaves until the spring, because a lot, especially on the oak leaves, a lot of them, there are eggs of some type of a caterpillar or something like that. And so let those hatch out, let it warm up, and then you can mulch your leaves and things like that. But also some of the taller plants that grow, when they die in the fall, they'll leave a hollow stalk. So those hollow stalk now become either a home for a native bee or a home for them to lay eggs. So if we think we want to keep everything clean and cut everything down, now we're denying the place for something to continue on with either their life or their next generation.
Wow.
Yeah. and there's proof of it, because, like, if you go to these big box stores, you can buy it's kind of gimmicky, but they'll say this is like a bee house, and it's just a bunch of little tubes, round tubes, and they're all kind of laying together. And if you hang it out there, like, yeah, a bee or some kind of a bug will find and build a house in there. Well, you don't even have to go buy it. Like, just leave your stuff. Don't cut it down. Cut it down in the spring after, whatever's hatched, or after the, cold's gone. And so, yeah, it's interesting.
You mentioned how the bees don't really, the native bees and the non-native bees don't really have a big problem with each other. That seems very counterintuitive because most of the like non-native or invasive stuff, it just takes over and all the native stuff just gets killed by it. What is special about the bees?
I don't know. Maybe it's that they're not competitive, right? So I mean, they're out foraging for pollen and nectar, right? And they go into a flower and they just kind of bounce around and get it, and then they go. So they're competing for the same source versus for one another. Whereas like a wasp will want to get into a beehive or just to get a bee to kill the bee and eat it.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that's where the differences are. They're both focused on finding the same thing versus one is trying to eat the other.
So sometimes they might just go to different areas or different plants to get that.
Yeah.
What has been harder about being so committed to native plants than you initially expected?
Probably two things. One is just the physical part of it, and that's on me. Like, we don't need to have 3.5 acres, but we do, and so just keeping up with that volume, I guess, maybe not volume, that just that size, like, because it does take work and it takes time, and especially in the spring when things start to grow fast, like, it takes a while to keep up. So just the physical nature of the size, keeping up with it. But probably the other thing is, it's difficult to find people to talk about it with. Like I'm passionate about it and I like to talk about it, but like, and I'm not a social person, but if, you think about like at our tailgates, right? A bunch of guys, like none of those guys there, like if I were to talk about, they want to talk about sports, they want to talk about golf, and I like all those things too, but I'm not passionate about them. And so to strike up a conversation about, native plants or this or that, it's like, like nobody wants to do that. So, so just that, having, being able to share my passion with somebody, that's been a little bit hard. Jill will listen to me just because she loves me and we're partners, right? But she's not passionate about it. I like to, Jay, for whatever reason, like he's passionate about it. And so, and he gets excited about it too. So like we can talk about it, and that's been a good relief for me.
Yeah. He showed me some pictures of their place in Oklahoma. He's doing a good job. That's a pretty cool yard they got going on.
He is.
This time of year, it's winter, so
yeah. And I think if in his neighborhood, there's quite a bit of people that are doing native stuff, and there'll be people walking by and they'll comment on it. They looks good and all that. And his is not messy. In the process, it got messy, but once he got kind of everything done to this first phase, it looked really good. And Angelina's done a lot actually too. So yeah.
Is there anything that you miss about a more conventional backyard?
I do. I mean, in our yard right around our house, I would say it's conventional. It's not native grass. It's not Bermuda, but it's not native. But I still get satisfaction out of having it nice and cleanly groomed. So, so I still get that, and that's probably the biggest thing. It's just the satisfaction that you might get from a nicely manicured, mowed grass. But outside of that, there's nothing. There just really isn't. No, there's not.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
I think it shows how, even though it's a very important thing and it's a bit of an undertaking, that there aren't really a lot of regrets to have.
Yeah.
Because it's still a yard. It's still a backyard. It's still a lawn. And it can be more meaningful without really any kind of negatives to it.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
That's in a kind of a backwards way. That's satisfying
Mm-hmm.
because I think with stuff like this, you kind of want to hear that, man, I do miss this part of it. But I think in this case, it's one of those things where it's very like relieving to be like, oh no, this is actually just a good thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I think, like you said, it's a nice benefit to have so much land that you kind of can have a little area that you can keep manicured, and you get that satisfaction, like you said. I think that's a cool like benefit to have, and it plays right back into what you were saying about how if you just have a few native plants in your yard, like you don't have to necessarily fully go all in at first.
Yeah.
Do you think that native plants in themselves are convincing?
You'd be surprised the number of native plants. I kind of geeky about this, but I've identified probably 150 native plants in our yard. I haven't planted them all. Like, trust me, I mean, if I were to guess, I would say maybe I've planted 40, maybe 50, maybe not, probably 40-ish plants. The rest of them either were there, like an oak tree, that's a native plant, right? Or the seed bank was set and they have grown just, and like it's, going back to that. There's stuff that's had sun for, we probably cleared the back maybe in year 3. So for 7 or 8 years, and maybe it took 3 or 4 years for that specific seed to pop up. So it's just, constantly allowing that to happen as well, and to see that evolution. There was something else I was going to say and I completely spaced it off. Oh, well.
It's all good.
Yeah.
I think what's interesting about the native plants is that by just planting a couple of them, like you were saying before about it being an information problem or a knowledge thing, where once you have a few, for some people, I think that'd probably kind of pique the interest a little bit, and then you look into it more, and then you, instead of 3, now you have 6,
yeah.
And then eventually your entire yard is just native plants, and you come to appreciate it more. And I think it's a cool parallel to like developing, like a personal strength or something, or a skill that you want to get good at, where you just have to start, in a sense.
Yeah.
What is working with native plants? I mean, we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but kind of from that perspective, what has it taught you about progress?
It's ongoing. It's satisfying. And it's probably never ending. Just, for some of the reasons that we pointed out, it's just, kind of the whole evolution of what, if you allow it, what will happen, right? The stuff that grows well in one place may not grow well in another place. We have very different soils, even from here to our house. Like, there's probably a good chance that you guys have some clay here. And then the very corner of our house, we have clay, but then we have sandy loam. There's this area is called the Blackland Prairie, and one of its characteristics are heavy clay soils and with veins of sandy loam in them. And just with those two things, you get very different, distinctive plants that will grow in either one of those. So just, moving something 10 feet can make the world a difference, or allowing it to evolve 10 feet. So I think from that perspective, you're just looking at things from the perspective that it's ongoing progress.
It's been something that I've been thinking about a lot lately. I talked to Will Vasquez a couple weeks ago about his kind of story, because he's pursuing a master's in music performance.
Uh-huh.
And that's a lot of work. And the reason I wanted to talk to him is because I find it very interesting when people decide to turn art into work. whenever their art becomes their career. I think that's a very difficult decision. And I don't think people always realize what that entails. So in talking to him, one of the things we talked about was how to continue to find that joy or that satisfaction as you improve. Because whenever you're 15 starting percussion for the first time, like the progress is very obvious and relatively easy to acquire. And so whenever you can't play anything and then you can play one thing, that's a very big marker of like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. I learned something.
Yeah.
And so the distinction between then 12 years in, whenever, you know, your improvement looks like I sat in a practice room with a tambourine for 4 hours and I figured out a slightly different way to make like this particular noise for this excerpt that I'm going to do for one audition. It's a very different level of satisfaction and payoff there. Mm-hmm. And I think it kind of parlays well with this, where like as you, and this may even be a better example, where as you continue to pour into something, the rewards you get change in a pretty dramatic way sometimes. But whenever you're like attuned to that, the small reward you get in year 10 or year 20 of something can be more rewarding then than the big reward at the beginning, because you're like aware of it.
Yeah.
And you're more attuned to those fine details, where moving something 10 feet, you know, whenever you first cleared out all the acreage in the back, if you move something 10 feet, nothing would have really changed that first year, because it's all just been cleared out and there's no sun yet and all that. Now, moving something or just letting it go a little bit, you see that happening. Yeah. You see what those changes actually result in. I think that's huge, because you just have to start at the beginning.
Yep.
And that's what Will said, is like, you have to just start. Like, you have to just do it. And then those rewards themselves become self-evident.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think, and certainly in what I'm doing, again, it doesn't have to be native plants, but I think then your interest can evolve, because there's so, like, you know, you can focus on the plants, and then you can start understanding more about the soil, carbon sequestering. You know, there's all kinds of different sayings about it, but like 1 teaspoon of soil has more organisms in it than are people in the world, right? Like 10 billion. But not all soil is created the same. Like, so that first top level of soil is extremely, the soil health is extremely important to plants, right? Because those excuse me, those organisms will die. Mm-hmm. And that, you know, over time, that helps build your soil, make your soil richer and more organic and better for things to grow in. So
all the biomaterial, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So then you start to, you know, even learning about like tilling up your ground. Like, we think we're going to put some grass in, or we're going to plant up, we should till the ground up. Mm-hmm. Well, should we really? Because when we do that, we're taking that top layer that's could be extremely healthy, and we're pushing it down below, where now all those things could die. And now we're having to start over with that top layer of soil. Huh. So you start learning about these concepts in ways you can, you know, I'm on I follow a gal, her tagline is "Soil is sexy." Like, let me tell you, soil's not sexy, but like there's a whole study of soil and how you can improve your soil, and, you know, composts, and now it's just not dry compost, it's wet compost. So making these soups that are rich in organic material that you can put on your ground to help it get it started, you know, and then even kind of tying back to the Sela and the Bamberger story. Well, the reason that was successful with native grasses is, again, our Bermuda grass roots, they're 1.5 inches to 2 inches deep. That's all the further they penetrate the ground. So anything below that, especially with a clay soil, it's just compact. Well, these native grasses, some of these native grasses, their roots go down 12, 15 feet.
What?
So if you can imagine those, even as if they're hair thin, these little strands going down, they're starting to create some structure in the soil. And most importantly is when a raindrop hits the ground, if there's nothing for it to connect to, it's going to go, right? And that going creates erosion, and it creates or it's absent of absorption. If all of a sudden now you have a structure for that drop of water to adhere to, that drop of water is going to go down, and now it's going to follow that path, and it's going to absorb into the soil. So you now create water in the ground, which is where his over time his springs came from. But then you create some structure in the soil. Another example, not to get off track though, is again,
go for it.
You know, riparian areas, which are areas around water. It's a transition from water to flat land. It's called riparian area.
That's a cool name.
Yeah. And those are intended to have plants in them, because if you can imagine, water on dirt is going to erode, but if you've got some good structure in there, that will hold that ground together. And that's why there are plants that like water, right? Those live in riparian areas. Well, you know, when we typically clean up around a lake or something like that, again, we think clean is good. So we're cutting down the grass, we're cutting trees down because we want to be able to look out in there. And what we're doing is we're killing the substructure that holds that soil together and eliminates erosion. And then the ground erodes, and then we pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to build berms to hold it back. Like, if we just wouldn't have messed with it to begin with, it would all be good.
And the root structure gives place for the water to go if the water level rises. Yeah,
Exactly.
Is it possible to like rebuild that stuff with native plants?
100%. And that's what Bamberger did. That's, that's some of the stuff I'm experimenting with. I planted there are 4, they call it the big 4 native grasses in Texas. There's a bunch of them, but the main 4 are big blue stem, little blue stem, Indian grass, and switchgrass. And I have 3 of the 4. And big or little blue stem it's probably 3 or 4 feet tall, and it's a beautiful grass. It looks a little unwieldy, but it gets this beautiful red in the fall. And I'm planting it in different places and it's one of those that gets the 10-foot deep roots. And I'm planted on our property kind of slopes, right? So we have some spots that get erosion because there's the lack of that structure. So I'm planting them in some of those spots. And, you know, if you think about it, even a 5% grade, like if it rains and there's nothing there to catch it, that ground below is going to be dry just because nothing's ever going to absorb there. And even in those few places, those plants are surviving because they're starting to get some structure there, and they're starting to get some water that's staying there and not eroding, and it's stopping my erosion. So, hey.
Yet another win-win.
Another
for
win-win.
The plants, yeah.
Yeah.
To kind of, start to land this plane a little bit, what would you say to someone who wants to start a big project but feels overwhelmed?
Start small. Just pick, and if that project is to introduce native plants, just pick 2 or 3. Like, probably first of all, learn about what are the local native plants. There's tons of resources on them. There a lot of the nurseries are around here will have some sections of native plants now. Again, it's starting to get awareness. We're actually starting to make a change, so that's good. So just learn about them, number one, because it's possible that you could already have some. But if not, take a leap. Maybe the goal first year is to buy 3 or 4 native plants and plant them in your landscape, and just to see how it works, and just go from there. Again, but think of it in terms of nobody has to change it. I know a couple ladies that live in Lantana that they've got these little garden homes, so they don't have a big yard. But they've got, most or half of their backyard is in native stuff, and it looks nice and clean and neat. And yeah, it works well. So yeah, just pick one or two. Don't look at it as a big project. Probably from that perspective, it'll be easier. If people are doing their own thing, it'll be easier because they probably overall they are lower maintenance, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're probably gonna water them because you're watering everything else, which is fine. But yeah, in terms of the upkeep of them, they're probably fine that they're less maintenance overall.
What is this journey since you started clearing out the back and turned this into what it is now? What has it taught you about humility and faith?
Probably from a faith perspective, just reassurance. Again, it can be daunting, but reassurance, knowing that, and there's no proof, right? It's a feeling. Reassurance that I'm being a good steward, and that I believe I'm being a witness, and it may be a witness to a small audience, and I think that's okay. I don't think God looks at anybody or and has this expectation that people change the world. I think his expectation is that we do what we can, which I feel like I'm doing, and we work together, and that we treat each other well. And I think, two of those three things just in what I'm doing with this project, or, I don't even look at it as a project anymore. It's kind of a lifestyle. I feel like I'm doing that. And probably another element to that is just the mental health aspect for me personally. I get a lot of what do I want to say? Decompressing from you can have a really bad day. And unfortunately, I think I'm probably built to be doing physical labor, right? That's just, and so I'm, sitting in an office all day long. Those two probably don't work too well. So that gives me the ability to go blow off steam. And I do it in a way that is healthy. I think, I could go to the bar and blow off steam, and I still do that. But if I did that every day, that probably wouldn't end up well for anybody, right?
No. And then I think that plays into the humility aspect too, on a very similar note, where it looks, or what I'm hearing is that it plays well into what your expectations are and what you're able to do and how to balance those things. Yeah. Is that kind of how it is, or what do you think?
Yeah, I would definitely say that. Yeah. And I think it kind of ties into, knowing that what you're doing may not be of interest to a lot of people, but if, you can get a few people interested along the way, change never happens from nothing, right? So, just feeling like I'm part of that, it works for me.
Eric Welke, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. That was fantastic. That was, on so many levels, I'm going to call it a masterclass on how to think about doing difficult things. And then also the native plant stuff is so interesting. The way to think about what a landscape should be, what a backyard should be. Stunning.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. It's fun. I like to talk about it, and I appreciate the time.
Absolutely. So. Go ahead and plug your Instagram. And if there's any resources, you named a few while we were talking, but if there's any notable resource people should go to if they're looking for native plant information, yeah, your Instagram and drop those things too.
Yeah. So there's it's a couple good resources. So Lady Bird Johnson started a foundation, and it's called wildflower.org. That's the URL. It's probably, and it's not just specific to Texas. In total, there's a lot of it that is Texas focused, but it's probably the best resource in the world for native plants. Again, it's wildflower.org or Lady Bird Johnson. And you can find, I think there's a ways that you can search for your area and get native plant lists, for that. There's a society that I belong to, NIPSOT, MPSOT, Native Plant Society of Texas. Tons of resources out there. Again, for your physical location, there's chapters all around Texas, and there's lists of plants in your area. You can find that for most areas. I did some research for Jane Angeline in Oklahoma. You can do the same thing there. And then my Instagram is Wildwood Welke, and I post. It's focused on educational. I used to send the kids, pictures of this or that or whatever, and they're like, you oughta like create an Instagram page. So I did it, and I try to post things that I think are cool. I don't post a lot on there, but there's good resources out there. And again, that's Wildwood Welke. So
awesome. Eric, thank you.
All right. Thanks, Austin.